the Arab Research Center, the CAIR, and all these organizations coming in solidarity to fight the injustice that we're seeing right now. Without each one of us taking the responsibility to voice our support, whether it's monetary, whether it's in person, whether attending programs, and providing education for each one of us, we won't get through this. So inshallah, I ask that you, if you want to learn more about the work that CAIR does, please speak with me or Zahra about the program, what that we provide, and also to do outreach in the community and to be able to provide the services when they are needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sister Spojba Nasiri. That was really helpful information. At this time, I want to quickly inform of other events that are going on that have also sponsored our event today. One is the Children of War. They have papers, I think, in the back of the room if you're interested in donating, as well as an Islamic relief event going on for Afghanistan next week, both Saturday and Sunday here in Hayward, and one in, I think, Rancho Cordova. And those informations are on your table if you're interested. At this time, I'd like to request our next speaker. Sister Zahra Billoo is a civil rights attorney and the executive director of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. In this capacity, she leads the oldest CAIR chapter in the country, serving the Bay Area Muslims. Sister Zahra not only facilitates trainings and workshops at local masajids and universities, but also provides direct legal services for victims of law enforcement targeting and Islamophobia. She's the person that we always see out there standing in the forefronts for us, not only on TV, but in the protesting, even just a couple weeks ago in the airport. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Sister Zahra Billoo.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? Really? I don't know. We have a racist president in office. The most openly racist president we've had in a very long time. So if you're good, maybe we're on different pages. I've gotten less shy about saying it, right? He has targeted our community. He has targeted women. He has targeted the LGBT community. He has targeted disabled people, and he has targeted immigrants. And in some ways, what we've heard from Sister Spojba and I would agree is that much of the policies targeting our communities have existed for a very long time. He's just not hiding it anymore. He's open about it, he's proud about it, he tweets about it, for heaven's sake. So he's a racist, and I'm just gonna say it. In December of 2015, when he was then just a candidate, Donald Trump said we need to ban Muslims from the United States. He wasn't the only candidate to say it. Other candidates talked about extreme vetting. They said we have to send in surveillance into Muslim neighborhoods. Some of you may remember Ted Cruz talked about Muslim neighborhoods. I was born and raised in the United States in a practicing Muslim household. I have yet to find a Muslim neighborhood. Fremont comes close, but it is not a Muslim neighborhood by any means. And it wasn't just the Republican candidates either. You'll recall that Hillary Clinton, when she talked about our community, said we need to use them to fight ISIS. I don't know about all of you. I don't know how to fight ISIS. I don't know anyone in ISIS. I have nothing to do with ISIS, right? And I'm tired of having to explain that over and over again. But it was very trendy in the 2016 election cycle to talk about Muslims a certain way. And so some of us said, it actually, no matter who wins this election, the anti-Muslim sentiment that has become very normal will take a very long time to clean up. And we worried about the hate crimes and the language and the Islamophobia, but we also worried about the policies that would come from either president. So where are we today? December 2015, they start to say ban Muslims, vet Muslims, interrogate Muslims, can't have Muslims in government. You guys remember, it was a circus. For a full year, it was a circus. In other parts of the world, they laughed at our elections. Usually it's the other way around, but this time, parts of the world laughed at America. In 2016, we saw more attacks on mosques and Muslim organizations than any other year that we've documented before. And in the 10 days following the presidential election, there were more anti-Muslim hate crimes than we have seen in any other 10-day period. There were over 100 that were reported to CAIR alone. And those, mind you, you all know someone. Someone yells terrorist at them, their child gets bullied at school, the FBI shows up at their door, and what do? They don't tell anyone, right? Many of us know someone like that, and we're saying, go get help, there's help out there, and they don't tell anyone, right? So when I say 100, that's just who came forward. And we went and we verified their stories, right? 10 days. And again, not just the Muslim community. There were anti-female incidents, right? So women being attacked, blacks being attacked, immigrants being attacked, LGBT individuals being attacked. People were violently attacked across our country from November 8th to November 18th. And it hasn't necessarily slowed down, but what we were saying was, again, we're concerned about hate crimes and hate incidents, but now we're worried that the highest elected official in this country is someone who is openly racist and Islamophobic and has very little regard for our democracy. So what does that mean? On January 20th, he takes the oath of office. And he tells us in that speech and in the days leading up to it and afterwards that he's going to move really quickly to fulfill his campaign promises. Again, he's not shy about it, he's not sugarcoating it. On January 25th, so it's Wednesday, January 25th, he signs an executive order. Now this executive order is not the Muslim ban, but I want to make sure that we're thinking about it so that we remember how our communities are connected to other communities. He says, I'm going to build a wall between America and Mexico. He says, I'm going to get Mexico to pay for it, and Mexico laughs at him and they're still fighting about it, right? But he signs an executive order saying, I'm going to build a wall between America and Mexico. He also says, I am going to pull federal dollars from any city or county that declares itself a sanctuary. So what's a sanctuary? A sanctuary is a city or county where the government has said you cannot conduct immigration raids in our cities. Our police officers value the diversity of our communities. Our jails do things like hold drunk drivers and people who are involved in crimes, but they don't break apart families. They don't deport people before they have their day in court, right? That's a sanctuary. And as Muslims, we should appreciate that concept because it's not just about immigration, which of course impacts us. It's also about FBI interactions. So it's cities that are saying, hey, the FBI can't use the local police to target the Muslim community. As Muslims, we value this. One, because it directly impacts us, but two, because from the perspective of our values, we don't want anyone to be targeted or oppressed. Right? We want everyone to have a fair trial. We want families to be kept together. We don't want people to be sent to countries that they don't want to go to. So that's on the 25th. On the 27th, he signs what is now being called a Muslim ban. Spojmi talked about this. What does the executive order do? A few things. Immediately, it stops all refugees. Every single refugee trying to come into this country, it says no. We're closing our doors on you for 120 days. Then it says, for Syrian refugees, the ones in the world that need our help the most right now, because we have let the president of Syria kill hundreds of thousands of people there. We haven't intervened at all, right? The world has watched as what is nearly a genocide has happened in Syria. America says to Syrian refugees, indefinite ban. So 120 days for all refugees. Forever for Syrian refugees, until further notice. You can't come to America. The other thing it does around refugees is under the Obama administration, there was an allotment for 110,000 refugees to come to the United States every fiscal year. It takes that count and it says, no, we're going to reduce it to 50,000, right? So it significantly conveys to America, but also to the rest of the world, we don't care about the people who need us. Whether we created the mess in the other country or someone else created it, we don't care about it. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is it targets 7 countries. It's a little bit of a tongue twister here. Iraq, Iran, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, and Yemen. Once again, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, and Yemen. I always have to say it twice to make sure I didn't forget one. 90 days, no immigration from these countries. green card holder, immigrant visa, or non-immigrant visa. It doesn't matter what your status is. If you are from one of these 7 countries, you cannot come in for 90 days. So 2 things about this. 1, there is an exception here. For who? For religious minorities from these countries. Who are the religious minorities in Yemen? They are not Muslim. Who are the religious minorities in Iran? Again, they are not Muslim. So when they say, why do we call this a Muslim ban? Because they indefinitely barred Syrians. Because they targeted 7 Muslim countries and then they made an exception for people who are not Muslim. Okay? The other thing to keep in mind, because we want to remember that our struggles are connected to other communities, but also that this happens in a bigger context. Those 7 countries are among 7 countries that we have bombed. We have been bombing Yemen, right? Just last week we killed an American citizen in Yemen. We have been arming Saudi Arabia to bomb Yemen. We have been starving Iran. We have been starving Iraq and bombing them, right? And the list goes on. You all don't need convincing that we have been bombing these 7 countries. So we create a mess and then we say, you can't even come to the United States if you want to. That's what it does there. The third thing that it does is it starts the conversation around a values test. So we're going to start to ask people who want to come into the United States, what are your religions? What are your politics? What do you believe in? What is the idea here? The idea is that we are going to vet everyone that comes in so that they align with Donald Trump. And we actually heard about that happening on the first night. Some of you may have experienced delays at the airport at some time before. The delays at the airport at JFK, the night that this executive order was signed, included people being questioned, what do you think about Donald Trump? So here's one of the rules I always remind people. I will tell you what I think of Donald Trump. I already said it. Racist, sexist, misogynist, oh, did I say incompetent? Right? No government experience whatsoever. But if a government agent asks me that, I have every right to say it is none of your business. Because the First Amendment of our Constitution says, the government doesn't get to ask me about religion and politics. It's something that we celebrate and we cherish as Americans because we know that when the government gets to choose and ask, there's an effect. What is the effect? Intimidation. People feel less comfortable praying. They feel less comfortable going out looking Muslim. They feel less comfortable coming to AAMO because they don't want the government to ask them. So the executive order does 3 things. Refugees, the 7 Muslim countries, and the values test. Immediately, we see people. The first people that are targeted are the people who were in the air when the executive order was signed. Imagine you're thinking, Alhamdulillah, I bought my ticket, I'm coming to America. And you get on the plane and you're going to one America. You land and it's a very different America because the president has signed a piece of paper that changes things. So out of JFK on that first night, we had a couple of people with visas who were sent back. So they were told, you can try to stay, maybe you'll get deported. If you get deported, you won't be able to come back for 5 years. Or you can just leave right now. And they didn't want to take the risk, so they left. We had a couple of people with green cards who were detained 6 hours, 8 hours, and 10 hours. And they were asked things like, what do you think of Donald Trump? They were handcuffed at JFK on that first night. Our partners, there's a really great group in New York called CAIR, C-L-E-A-R. They're based out of one of the law schools there. And they were on the ground at the airport that same night advocating for people at 3 a.m. And one of the first conversations I had with them was at about 3 a.m. their time, midnight, our time, and I said, you guys need to go to sleep. And they said, no, we have to tell you what it looks like so that when the flights land on the West Coast the next day, you're prepared. Saturday, flights started to come in, people were getting stuck, they didn't know what to do. So we mobilized a few different strategies at CAIR. The first was the lawsuits. ACLU filed a lawsuit on Friday night, CAIR filed a lawsuit on Monday, the state of Washington filed a lawsuit on Monday. We said we have to fight this in the courts. This is about the law. And I'm going to circle back to the lawsuits in a few minutes. The other strategies that we needed were direct legal services, right? If any of you has ever had a child that's been bullied, you've gotten stuck at an airport, you shouldn't have to worry in that moment of crisis, can I pay for an attorney? Because attorneys are expensive. It costs money. And in that very moment, you shouldn't have to be stressed out about that. And that's why groups like CAIR exist. That's why we fundraise year-round, so that the community invests and says, when you are terrified, you shouldn't have to worry, how am I going to pay for an attorney? So we deployed attorneys to the phones and on the ground to the airports to talk to families, to advocate for people who were stuck, right? And that exists, those services exist whether we're talking about the airport, or we're talking about school bullying, or an FBI visit, or problems at work, or anything like that. So direct legal services. The other strategy was to talk to our elected officials, right? This is a government policy. We need our friends in government to fight it. And in California, and in particular in the Bay Area, we're really fortunate to have elected officials who support our community, who hate Donald Trump, who are understanding of what the problems are, right? And there was almost like a competition. Gavin Newsom, who is the Lieutenant Governor of California, came to the airport. Eric Swalwell, who represents the Dublin, Pleasant, and Tri-Valley area, came to the airport. They were so supportive of our community, right? And we used them, we worked with them to do two things. One, help the individuals who are stuck. And two, to challenge the president, to say that you can't do this, that this runs counter to American laws. I raised this civic engagement piece because that relationship building doesn't happen overnight. If I've never spoken to Congressman Swalwell, I can't call him on Saturday, January 28th and say I have a problem, right? We need to build those relationships. And so in thinking about what are the action items around all of this, and I'll walk through action items throughout this. When you need individual legal help, call for legal help. Know that resources exist, whether it's private attorneys or nonprofit organizations like CAIR, our friends at the Asian Law Caucus and other places, call for help. When you protect yourself, but you also protect your family and your community, right? You protect the next person. If Zahra lets the FBI into her house, or lets the Customs and Border Patrol agents handcuff me and doesn't complain, doesn't tell a lawyer, then the next time they do it to someone, it's easier. So call for legal help. And actually there's a phone number I'm gonna give you right now. It's 408. You should all write it down. I'm gonna say it a few times until I see you writing it down. It's 408-986-9874. I'll say it again. 408-986-9874. And I'll say it one more time because that's how many times I insulted Donald Trump. 408-986-9874. That's the number for the CAIR office in this area. If you experience any type of discrimination, 408-986-9874. If you experience any type of discrimination because you are Muslim, because you are Afghan, because you're Iranian, because you're Pakistani, because you're Saudi, if you experience discrimination at school, at home, at work, any of that sort, because of that core identity piece, call us. We will do our best to help you. If we can't help you, then we're going to try to send you elsewhere. So the civic engagement piece that I was talking about before I took the tangent or I went back, these relationships don't happen overnight. They require all of you to continue to show up and be in community. So what's the action item here? Go to your next city council meeting. If you live in Fremont or Hayward or Newark or any of these cities, go to your next city council meeting. You don't have to do anything. Just sit there and look like you, right? Look like someone who is an Afghan American who is concerned about what's happening in their neighborhood. You don't have to talk about the Muslim ban. Talk about traffic on your street. Talk about water quality in your neighborhood. Talk about the smell from Milpitas or San Jose. I don't know, they're fighting about that, right? Like, talk about those things and just show up a few times. Meet the council members and meet the other people who go on a regular basis. Why? Because these are our neighborhoods and we should care about them. And because in the long run, when you need help, you don't want to be calling a stranger. You want to call someone who you saw every few weeks. The other thing to do around civic engagement is to save the date. Monday, April 24th. That's the 6th annual Muslim Day at the Capitol. Last year, we took 300 Muslims from this area to Sacramento to meet with their elected officials. Monday, April 24th, we have a bus that leaves here from Fremont. You don't even have to do the drive. You can drive there if you want to. But if you want us to drive you, we'll drive you also. Registration for that will open this week, and I'll follow up with Salma and Hafsa to make sure that all of the AAMO membership knows about it and can come. So, elected officials. The third thing is media, right? Media matters here. Why? Because if the only people I talk to are my friends in this room, then who cares, right? Like, what are we gonna do alone? No, we have to convince our fellow Americans that this is a problem, that this runs counter to our democracy, that we deserve equal rights just as everyone else. And so the next time you see something on television that upsets you, pick up the phone and call the station. But here's the other part of it. When you see something that you like, when you're like, oh wow, they gave CAIR 2 whole minutes, I really liked what they said, call the station and thank the station, right? And we know this when we raise kids, right? They do something bad, you gotta correct them, but they do something good, you gotta thank them also. So we have to use the media, and that's what we did. Airwaves across the country had stories from people who were stuck, lawyers who were at the airports, families who were concerned. And just so that you know, and I think you've heard these stories, which is why I'm not repeating them, even out of San Francisco International, we had pregnant women who were stuck 6 hours, 8 hours. Anyone that's ever been pregnant or knows someone who's been pregnant knows that you don't want to be stuck at the airport for 6 to 8 hours, not able to contact your family. It's very stressful. We had an elderly couple, my parents' age, stuck 30 hours. They landed at SFO 6:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. They got released Sunday afternoon at 12:30 p.m. No cell phones, no beds. No way for their kids on the outside to contact them. The families stayed overnight at the airports because we didn't know what to do, right? We used the media, we used the elected officials, we used our direct legal services, and we got them out, but it was 30 hours. So people who think that it's not that severe, it's very severe. And the Trump administration has been saying, oh, it's just a small inconvenience. No, no. 30 hours for a couple in their 60s is not a small inconvenience. That's the kind of thing that's really frightening. So we use the media. The last thing I'll say before circling back to the lawsuits is our friends and neighbors. I always say to my friends, if all of our friends look like each other, then we're not doing it right. I mentioned the other executive order on January 25th because it's important to know that other communities are under attack and that they're willing to stand with us. Most of the people who protested at SFO, did anyone here go to the protest at SFO? A couple in the back, okay. So that's fine. Right? Let me tell you what the protests at SFO looked like. The first phone call I got from an organizer was Saturday at 10 a.m. It was a white woman, not from our community. I don't even know if she has friends in our community, to be honest. She found my number on the internet. She said, I want to do something. I created a meetup page so people could know to come. 10:30 a.m., there's 35 people on the meetup page. That's it. I sent it to her. I told her, I'm driving, I'm working with clients. I can put it on Twitter and Facebook for you. That's what I can do. I sent it to a reporter, and we both noticed there's only 35 people who said they're coming to this thing. I got to the airport at 3 p.m. on Saturday. There were already thousands of people there. The people who were there were not Muslim for the most part. They were Caucasian, Latino, Black, some Muslim, some not. They were straight, they were gay, they were trans individuals, they were Christian, they were Jewish, they were everyone. Why? Because they said this is about America. This is about making sure that everyone knows that Muslims are welcome here. So at 3 o'clock there were thousands of people. I left the airport at 3 a.m. that night, so Sunday morning. The big protest lasted until 2 a.m. and then they left people there overnight to make sure that the people who were still stuck in detention knew that they had support. The next morning, Saturday, at 12 o'clock, they came back, and they stayed past 10:30 p.m., right? Thousands of people. You know what they did? They broke the records for BART, for how many people used BART to get to SFO. When the Muslims, how many of you have prayed at an airport and been nervous about it? I have. Yeah, right? Because you worry someone's gonna call security. Hundreds of Muslims prayed at the airport, and all of our friends who were protesting cheered for them. Right? When the protesters got hungry, all of their friends, also mostly not Muslim, who couldn't make it to the protest, started having pizza delivered to the airport. There was so much food at the airport that if you were a protester, a traveler, a stressed out family member, or even an airport worker, you weren't hungry. And their message over and over again was immigrants are welcome here. This is about protecting America. We love our Muslim neighbors, right? It was amazing. And I shared that not so that anyone's like, oh, I wish I had gone. No, it's so that we know that the next time another community, not our community, when a different community needs us, that we show up for them. So the last piece is the lawsuits. I mentioned a bunch of lawsuits were filed. How many of you are familiar with the story of Japanese internment? Right? A few of us. During World War II, on the West Coast, not Tennessee, not Nebraska, not Alabama, right? Not those places that we say we don't want to live there, not Texas, the West Coast, took 110,000 Japanese Americans, citizens and non-citizens. They gave them, I think, less than 2 hours notice. They were allowed to pack just what they could carry. And they sent them to American concentration camps. There were 11 camps. The families were there for 2, 3, and 4 years. And to give you a size of how big the room was, imagine a family of 4 in a cabin smaller than the square footage of this stage for multiple years on end. The restrooms were outside, and sometimes it would get so cold that they would have to use the restroom in a container, right outside their door, and then dump it out later at night. Pregnant women, elderly people, families, and children. Our country did this. And the Supreme Court said, that's okay. It's to protect the homeland. Fast forward to today. You've heard of Black Lives Matter, right? If you're in this room, you've heard of Black Lives Matter. Nearly every day, somewhere in our country, an unarmed Black man, woman, or child is killed by the police. And the police officer that does it sometimes does it while the person is running away. Sometimes does it when there is no gun anywhere in sight. Sometimes does it in an escalated traffic situation. And then gets put on paid leave. They don't get fired. And if and when the case goes to court, in the overwhelming majority of cases, there is no jail time served. I say that because it's important that we remember that we need every single strategy and that we are not alone in this. Thus far, alhamdulillah, the courts have sided with the community on the issue of the Muslim ban. But I don't want us to put all of our eggs in that basket. So what is the status of the lawsuits? The New York lawsuit that was filed by the ACLU on Friday night sought to protect people who were already stuck at an airport. So you got on a plane before the order was signed, you landed, and now you're stuck. What do? The court in New York said if you're already here, we will let you in. The CAIR lawsuit, which was filed on Monday, specifically the 29th or 30th, specifically says this is in fact a Muslim ban. It violates the First Amendment, and you can tell both based on the campaign statements from the president as well as the way the actual order is written, right? And then of course you have the statements from Rudy Giuliani and others who've said, I wanted to make this legal for Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump came to me and said, show me how to write a Muslim ban. So that's what the CAIR lawsuit does. The most progressive lawsuit right now is the one from the state of Seattle. So the whole state of Washington sues Donald Trump. Like, that's amazing, right? And it tells you that we have friends and allies. And they said, you're hurting our students that are coming in from foreign countries. You're hurting our Microsoft and Boeing workers, right? Like, you're hurting our economy. So the state of Washington takes Donald Trump to court. On February 3rd, a court in Seattle says, this looks really bad, this looks really dangerous, and the risk of harm is high. So we are going to put the whole executive order on hold for 2 weeks. So right now, everything that we've said about the executive order is on hold until Friday the 17th. So our advice to people is if you know someone from one of these 7 countries who is outside of the United States and a non-citizen, if they want to come back, they should come back now. They should come back any moment because we don't know what will happen next. Now, what are the possibilities? Donald Trump could go back to this court in Seattle and fight about the executive order. He could fight about it at the 9th Circuit, which is the mid-level court that many of us paid attention to this past week. He could take it to the Supreme Court. Right now, though, the most real possibility is that he will just write another executive order. It's something that presidents have used for a long time to do things when they can't get Congress or the judges on their side, right? They just write a piece of paper and they say, I'm the president, you don't get to review it, this is what I want to do. It sounds a lot like the dictatorships, again, that we talk about in other parts of the world, and we're seeing a president now who's doing it. I joke about him being incompetent, but what I worry is that he knows exactly what he's doing. Because what's happening in context here is he's saying the judges don't matter. Now, I don't know how many of you follow what happened in Pakistan over the last 10 years, right? But they basically said the judges don't matter. right? And that's really dangerous because you always need the judges. You need the judges to check the president. Sometimes the judges will get it wrong, which is why you need protests in the media and all of these things. But the judges are a cornerstone of our democracy, right? So he's saying the judges don't matter. He's saying you don't get to review my decisions. And by the way, while we're all stressed out about this executive order, he's putting into place Betsy DeVos, who has no experience with public schools but will now oversee the Department of Education. He's putting into place Jeff Sessions, who was too racist to be a judge 30 years ago. And today, he is the highest ranking law enforcement officer or prosecutor in our country. This is all really depressing, I know. I'm so sorry to be the bearer of bad news on so many fronts. We have a long road ahead of us, at least 4 years, at least. Some have said, well, maybe he'll get impeached. I don't think our Republican Congress is going to impeach him. But if they do, we have his vice president, who many have said is just as frightening. And whether or not he leaves office in 4 years or 8 years, we know that the cleanup from the Islamophobia will be really messy. So I want to circle back and close on my action steps. The first, again, is to get legal help. Know your rights and get legal help. And we can answer questions, I think, during the Q&A. The second is to be involved with your local elected officials, right? Make that a normal thing in your household so that the kids can run for city council 5 or 10 years from now. Make that a normal thing so that when you need Congressman Swalwell's help, you know how to reach him and you're not a stranger, right? Ro Khanna's help, Gavin Newsom's help, all of these people who've said we stand with your community, they still need to know who our community is. The third is media, right? Engage the media. It's important that we talk to each other, but it's also important that we call the media when we're having a protest. That we get mad at the media and we tell them, oh, I didn't like what you did. Not just that I tell my family in the living room or I tell Facebook, to actually call the media. I have to also thank them, right? If all I do is criticize someone and then I never praise them, I never thank them, they're just gonna think she always complains, right? That's the third piece. The fourth piece is to get to know our neighbors and friends and to be there for them when they need us. Many of them are experiencing far worse targeting than what we're experiencing. I mentioned what happened to Japanese Americans 70 years ago. I mentioned what happened to Black Americans nearly every day. This past Thursday, when many of us were celebrating the good news about the Seattle decision, saying, oh, alhamdulillah, the executive order is still on hold for a little while, you know what happened? Immigrations and Customs Enforcement raided and arrested over 100 people in Southern California. They broke apart families, they went to schools and workplaces, right? They took people who are law-abiding, who are paying their taxes, who are working hard, who got to this country in a way that was less than traditional, who don't have documents, and they said, we're getting rid of all of you. This isn't about public safety. This is about the Trump administration trying to scare communities, right? So we need to make sure that as many of you appreciated how I told you about the SFO protests and how most of the people there were not Muslim, they were there to support us, but the next time there's a protest for another community, let it be that they say, and the Muslims showed up for us. Jazakallah khair.